You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYPC.
WCYTV
Here on the Daily Signal.
Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. We were supposed to be in Dallas this evening, an interview with Sage Steele set up for y'all, and some coverage from some of the big moves that are going to take place as the country starts to transition into the midterms. This is going to be a midterm unlike any other, and so we're trying to make sure that we give you all of that coverage in advance. That's another conversation for another time, because there is more pressing news that we are making strides to get to you guys, whether or not I want to gallivant around the country or not. So, per CNBC, former FBI Director James Comey is expected to be indicted for lying to Congress by the Department of Justice in the next few days. There are numerous individuals in the prior administrations under Barack Obama, under Joe Biden, that a large portion of the country is eager to see face, if not open congressional investigation, indictment and prosecution for very clearly articulated and recorded crimes. One of the most clearly and articulated and easily recorded crimes is mortgage fraud, because there's a lot of forms. On various forms you have to fill out, a lot of questions and statements, checkboxes and signatures, where you promise that you are not violating the very clearly outlined law to get a better mortgage rate. One of the other things that it is very, very difficult to hide from is when one perjures themselves before Congress, especially if you are an administration official. Once you have gone under oath and you start answering questions from Congress, for example, on, let's say, on whether or not you leaked classified information. Let's say Senator Ted Cruz was asking you that under oath, and then you lied in front of all of the cameras in front of the entire American people. Clip 3.
To another topic. On May 3rd, 2017, in this committee, Chairman Grassley asked you point blank, quote, "Have you ever been an anonymous source in news reports about matters relating to the Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation?" You responded under oath, quote, "Never." He then asked you, quote, "Have you ever authorized someone else at the FBI to be an anonymous source in news reports about the Trump investigation or the Clinton administration?" You responded again under oath, "No." Now, as you know, Mr. McCabe, who works for you, has publicly and repeatedly stated that he leaked information to the Wall Street Journal and that you were directly aware of it and that you directly authorized it. Now, what Mr. McCabe is saying and what you testified to this committee cannot both be true. One or the other is false. Who's telling the truth?
I can only speak to my testimony. I stand by what the testimony you summarized that I gave in May of 2017.
So your testimony is you've never authorized anyone to leak. And Mr. McCabe, if he says contrary, is not telling the truth. Is that correct?
Again, I'm not going to characterize Andy's testimony, but mine is the same today.
All right, I'm going to make a final point because my time has expired.
I want to clarify, that is not how you evade those kinds of allegations. And by the way, when he was later asked about particular memos, Comey immediately clammed up and instead of answering any questions said, "Oh, my lawyer wouldn't want me to say anything." Very, very, very telling when there's something that's supposed to be super duper above board.
Maybe for you or your attorney, my understanding is that when you shared your memos with your legal team, that there was a follow-up for a classified containment operation by the Bureau. Was there a spill of classified information when you shared those memos?
Yeah.
Wait a minute. That would be a very point blank, very simple, easy to answer kind of thing. By the way, he can say, yeah, there was some kind of a leak. We don't know what happened. I would have liked to have seen that investigated further. Does he say that? No. He does the old...
Talk about something like that.
Well, that's important.
Oh, my lawyer doesn't want me to talk about something like that. Okay. Now, there's a lot of aggravation from individuals around the country who says, wait a minute, getting Comey for lying to Congress, that sucks. I wanted him tried for treason and traitorousness. Okay. There are, in fact, specific processes in the law that you have to go to in order to charge individuals based on particular crimes. One of the important facets of our legal system is that you are hard pressed to just charge someone with all of the book. You can't just chuck an entire law dictionary at somebody and say, you know what, I'm sure that'll stick, it'll be fine. When they did that with Sean Diddy Combs, and they charged Sean Diddy Combs with racketeering, criminal racketeering and trafficking, instead of just going through case by case the mid-level crimes and working their way through them and putting him away for 60, 70 years, they went for RICO and they lost most of it. When you throw the book at someone without careful preparation, you screw yourself out of delivering justice. And regardless of Attorney General Pam Bondi's direction, there are individuals that are at the federal prosecutor level who are currently being ousted and swapped. For example, removing Seibert and installing Halligan, which moves a lot of things forward to begin genuine, actual indictments beyond just what we are all used to, the strongly worded letters from individuals X, Y, and Z. Again, that's what Trump was alluding to in the truth post that he deleted after a couple of minutes, in which he suggested that, you know, maybe if someone would get on the ball here, mortgage fraud and lying to Congress, really hard to squeak out of those. What if the things we know we've got them dead to rights for, we charge them for? Makes sense to me. Now, there's other stuff, of course, that we could talk about regarding Comey, but MSNBC, they got out the tinfoil hats. It's something. Here you go.
Three sources familiar tell MSNBC former FBI Director James Comey is expected to be indicted in the coming days. The full extent of the charges being prepared against Comey is unclear. Joining us now, MSNBC Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delanian and MSNBC Senior Investigative Correspondent Carol Leonnig. Chris O'Leary, Ashley Parker still with us.
Chris O'Leary we're going to get to in a second because he was something else today. But anyway.
Carol, help us understand the reporting.
So, Katie, we have some sources who say that for several weeks now, the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Eastern District of Virginia, and actually in offices that are potentially much further south than Alexandria, have been eyeing ways to indict Comey, and they are getting very much closer. The statute of limits, rephrase, they are arguing that Comey, there is evidence to suggest Comey lied to Congress in his...
You see that slip up? Did you catch it? Because there's objective evidence he lied to Congress. So again, there are some things that when you are reporting, it's very helpful to say words like allegedly, could have, it seems. There are some crimes, however, where the evidence is so obvious, so clearly available before the gentlemen of the jury, that it really doesn't take that much to say, I mean, yeah, he lied before Congress. It was objectively untrue. He admitted it later in memos that have since been released by the FBI director, which, hot take here, just for the boys and girls at home. If you are ever the director of the FBI, then be aware that whatever memos you send inside your Federal Bureau of Investigation can be released by Congress, by the next presidential administration, and by the next director of the FBI. What you do will, in fact, leave a paper trail, even if you try to hide it.
Testimony on the Hill in September of 2020. And for viewers out in the audience who may not be legally as nerdy as me and Ken, I'll just say that there's a statute of limitations to charge people with the crime of lying to Congress or perjury, and that's 5 years.
Okay, now we get to the fun stuff here. So the argument that is going to be made is, well, he didn't. And if he did, it's been a while, so come on. The statute of limitations in this case is a very, very weak defense, given that for a lot of those things, the statute of limitations only applies if the only crime is in and of itself lying to Congress. Lying to Congress to cover up unlawful activity is something else. Again, it's a difference between, you know, my kid telling me this little white lie about the sky outside being chartreuse and then trying to use a lie to hide something else that, you know, the kid's done. We recognize there's some kind of a difference there. So does the U.S. legal system. Now, this brings us over to a greater misunderstanding of the U.S. legal system. The latest act of left-wing terrorism today in Dallas, Texas. So as we'll talk about here in a couple of minutes, this is the third open assault on immigration enforcement officials in the state of Texas in the last 2 months. It's disgusting. And we're going to have to continue over on the live stream. Sorry, radio crew. FCC says I got to send you to commercial. See you guys in a second. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. Now, I don't have to go to commercial here on the live stream, so we'll continue. Right now, I am rather annoyed because I have spent the entire day, when I was not sitting in the lovely, comfortable seats of Indianapolis International Airport, reading the conversations of individuals who amazingly develop this series of super incredible moral standards when it comes to reporting an event in which it is very and clearly obvious that the left is getting out of control. So whenever there is some type of a rape, whenever there is some type of a murder, whenever there is some type of an attempted or successful terror attack, a mass shooting, some type of a major assault, whenever the report comes out, this has happened. And especially if it's something where we see, okay, this has happened. This was a shooting that has taken place at an ICE facility in Dallas. It is pretty evident to the vast majority of Americans right off the bat what the motive had to do with somewhere in this entire situation. And number two, it's also very clear to any American with, forget double-digit IQ, a single-digit IQ American would be able to understand that given the rhetoric in the country openly, on every channel of discourse, on every platform of media, Immigration Customs Enforcement has been castigated, lambasted, and characterized as the Fourth Reich. And in doing so, the argument that we need to actually, wait a second here, ladies and gentlemen, hang on. We can't simply say this appears to be some kind of left-wing terror-style attack. That would be unethical and wrong, and I, for one, understand I am above that. I have heard that from individuals who claim to be on the right and the center, and I want you to know you are full of crap. You do not deserve to be taken seriously. The David Frenches and the pseudo-academics of the world who will look at an obvious attack against Immigration Customs Enforcement in Texas, amid a very obvious string of the most violent, politically violent month since the 1960s, if we're talking about individualized acts of direct individualized terrorism, not talking about mob violence, which clearly would be the summer of love in 2020, but if we're looking at individualized political acts of violence, this fits the exact same scope and pattern. And I was treated this morning to a rote of complaints because after the initial timeline, there was a standard of evidence claims and pattern recognition where the majority of Americans knew quite clearly what the motive or at least what the contributing factors was. And the media and a couple of politicians and journalists on the left, on the right, and the center, amazing. They brought out this like second skin that they slap on whenever it's time to talk about a left-wing act of violence. Again, if there's a situation in which a guy with a swastika on his right arm shoots up a synagogue, everyone's like, oh, there you go, motive, because it's common sense. But all of a sudden, you have someone with a trans flag on their arm, they shoot up a Minnesota school. Whoa, hang on a second here. We gotta wait until we know a motive. This, in the case of Tyler Robinson, this could be one of those kids who has a gay trans boyfriend who's a furry, who's like a MAGA Trump Republican. Because those are just so common. So you can tell I'm rather perturbed because there's this pseudo academia that comes out to flirt whenever there's an event like this, where they have to pretend that if you admit that left-wing terrorism in this country is a serious problem that requires serious attention and genuine action, they get terrified. Why? Because they're the same crew who said, no, it's both sides. Both sides are bad. We need to just calm down and lick the status quo's boots for the last couple of years. And guess what? It didn't work. And it got people killed. So unfortunately, now, before we bring the radio crew back in, we need to talk about this a little more specifically. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
It's It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Okay, welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast. As a moment of transparency, I'm going to tell you how we develop our standards of breaking news, of reporting on things, and then the sniff test. The sniff test is very important because in an age of social media, when rumors and AI are extremely prevalent and are used maliciously, having a sniff test is important. Now, I have tried, probably harder than I should have, to get a couple of major hosts around the various news spaces to come on the show and explain their sniff test. But they're a little busy at the moment, and so you're stuck with me. Sorry. Now, right this morning, when I got the information that there was a shooting in Dallas, immediately I looked at the location, I looked at all of the available evidence that we had, and then I checked for pattern recognition. This is something that we all do. So here's what we knew as soon as the initial report came out. There was a shooting at an immigration customs enforcement facility in Dallas. Cops had shut off this huge chunk of the interstate right next to it. 2 were dead and 1 was injured. At the time, police were also looking for a sniper. That was all that we knew. Now, at this point, you can infer 2 things. It was a shooting at an ICE facility, which means either this was something targeting law enforcement, as we've already seen, not just around the country, but in Texas, specifically, directly in the last couple of months, or perhaps and I hate to use the term best case scenario, but in a least political scenario, this is a person who is having a psychotic break, a schizophrenic, perhaps someone who is going through hyperbipolarism, a mania episode, a manic episode. And then, because they believed something about an ICE facility, they went to that ICE facility and then began shooting. There is no other scenario here that makes any sense. I've heard, well, maybe it was a right-wing American that was really angry about immigrants, and that could definitely be a case. I'm sorry, if you are stupid enough to believe that someone on the right side of the aisle, even way to the right side of the aisle, would shoot illegal immigrants as they are being detained and possibly deported, why would that be that doesn't make any sense. If you are stupid enough to believe that, honey, I have bridges to sell you, and you probably need somebody to tie your shoes. The other theory that I was told, because I had these wonderful arguments this morning about this nonsense with pseudo-academics, who said, well, actually, it could just be a mentally unwell person, and the mentally unwell person, they just could have spun the wheel of mystery and chance and just so happened to have a breakdown right outside the ICE facility. Like they had a wheel, and on the wheel of fortune, Pat Sajak had written gas station, school, library, a Denny's, and then an ICE facility. And then the schizo spun the wheel and it landed on ICE facility. If you are stupid enough to believe that, you deserve absolutely everything wrong that happens to you. That's not how it works. Now, why would take the best case, the least political scenario here of the shooting, and say, well, how would we know? How the schizophrenic person, in the case of just a mentally unwell person picking a place at random, how would they know to go after an ICE facility? Well, it just so happens that not just at the local level, not just at the state level, the national level, Democrats have been calling ICE facilities Gestapo centers where they're disappearing people and they're coming for you next. Because clearly the best thing to tell a schizophrenic person is they're coming for you next. And that's the information we had. Now, wait a minute. If that's what would have set the schizophrenic person off, because the only other stuff would be coming from the Trump administration, right? And from Republicans who say that it's a good thing for the community and for local resources that ICE is doing their jobs. So the only thing that could have radicalized a mentally unwell person in this case would, again, if you're just going purely from a mental break, no political angle at all, it would be those perpetuating this hyper-mania-laden episodic rhetoric. But once you say that, then who does the blame rest on? Those who are saying that ICE is a bunch of fascist Nazis, disappearing people, killing people, ripping mothers away from children. Oh, just like Pharaoh when he killed all of the Hebrew children under 2 years old. It's just like that. It's crystal knocked all over again. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of a secret. The very people who are pushing that rhetoric the representative to Congress from Dallas, one of those, Jasmine Crockett, who has routinely criticized immigration customs enforcement directly as all of the synonyms for fascist ICE, imminent threat, you need to get out there and fight, more than any other congresswoman at all, more than any other congresswoman or man. And may I remind you that since then, by the way, we've had incredible goobers like her progressive colleague Pramila Jayapal, who have just been telling people to get out, get ready to get out and fight. Be ready, get ready to get out there and throw your body into the fray. Pramila Jayapal.
We might call this getting strike ready. I think of it as getting us strike ready or street ready. And part of that is understanding our own strength. And as we develop that strength, being able to assess our risk tolerance, because we know that risk tolerance increases as the severity of the situation increases and as our own understanding of what's happening increases.
Incredible. So again, just get ready to go, and then a bunch of academic words to qualify why you just told people basically to get ready to hit the streets and grab a truncheon. Now, I will address one other possible theory that was thrown my way, which is, well, what if it's a cartel trying to silence, like a gang member? Guys, cartels largely operate south of the border, and if there's a Hispanic person that's being deported to Mexico, it would be a lot easier for the cartel to off them when they're in Mexico and no one is watching. In the middle of the ICE facility is not likely. Now, we ended up getting immediate evidence after about an hour of the mewling and the whining from the both sidesers. Wait, we need to stop. We can't suggest it's left-wing terrorism. We don't know. Then we got information that on one of the cartridges, on one of the bullets, was written anti-ICE. For those who are watching, here is the kind of aught clip that we're looking at, like kind of the almost like an on-block clip here in this situation. And on one of the rounds is written anti-ICE. Now, we also learned that there were shots fired through a specific window of the facility where essentially you wouldn't really be able to see in. We'll show that picture actually right now for those who are watching. Were fired through a window where staff are expected to be. And so it's very clear based on the window that was shot in, this person just kind of firing shots through this window, that they were trying to kill staff. But that wasn't widely reported at the time. That didn't stop many of the major network outlets, the usual suspects, from running out saying, oh, we don't know the motive. It's a mystery.
Those ICE agents not shot or hurt. We do not know, however, the motive of the shooter. That still remains an open question and will be under investigation, and we'll be continuing to ask our sources more about that. But what the Department of Homeland Security has pointed out is that this same facility back in late August also had to contend with a bomb threat at that facility. So certainly ICE has been contending with additional assaults, attacks, and threats to their facilities.
ICE has been contending with additional, the way that they say that. Yeah, there have been prior threats. So now the motive's even a little bit clearer. Again, there have been prior attacks on ICE facilities, Border Patrol facilities in Texas. And then we got the news that there were not any ICE agents killed, that two of the individuals who were killed were detainees, and that one of them was injured, two of them were killed. And then we found out that the shooter killed himself. And still, we had groups like MSNBC running some of the most insane mental gymnastics known to man. Radio crew, sorry, we got to send you to commercial. We're going to continue on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. The red herring argument, the one that was really lame, like from Scooby-Doo. Yeah, that was thrown out today here on MSNBC.
You can't just assume by that what was written on that shell casing that that's necessarily his motivation. He could have been doing that to thinking it was funny, trying to put law enforcement on the wrong track. Oh yeah, right. By the way, do you ever hear these outlets doing this when it's a suspected white supremacist shooting? If you have a guy that has like a T-shirt that says like, I don't like Jews, or hey, look at this swastika
I don't know, whatever those types of shirts say, whatever. Or he's let's say he's bald. They'll say, oh, he's a skinhead. I mean, look at the evidence. He has the swastika, he has the skinhead. I mean, there you go. Motive solved. Dr. Watson, fetch me my cocaine pipe. And it just so crack pipe, not cocaine pipe. Sorry about that. In this instance, they have to do all these. Well, maybe it's a red herring. Maybe on the other cartridges, it says pass go, but don't collect $200. Ooh. If you believe this, you're an idiot. If you believe this kind of mental gymnastic logic, then there really is no help for you. Maybe you are one of the people sucking down a bottle of Tylenol while pregnant to stick it to RFK Jr. Then, again, we told you about Chris O'Leary on MSNBC. He was going to be back. He sure is. He's... the pain. Chris O'Leary came forward to say that the writing on the bullets, again, that said anti-ICE, that's actually a right-wing tactic. See, it's actually deep-seated right-wing dog whistling, like when Obama did the OK symbol. Incredible.
Inspired? Are you worried about copycats?
Yes. I don't know if the rooftop trend is going to be a thing. I mean, it could just be coincidental that the best vantage point just happened to be elevated positions in this case. But people emulating this kind of attack is certainly a concern. The irony with the writing, the first time we really saw that was Brenton Tarrant in the Christchurch shooting in a mosque in New Zealand.
I'm amazed. I am so consistently amazed that we have to dig out, we have to find some type of potentially right-wing or white nationalist-style shooting. We're going to go around the globe. Like the Indiana Jones map pops up and the red line starts crossing the screen. Silly. It really is beyond silly. And by the way, please don't think that you, my audience, that's tuning into the show, that I am berating you for any of this. Absolutely not. My frustration lies with those who contend for your attention, those who compete with us and other good-natured individuals around the interwebs to try to tell you that you have some kind of moral obligation to sit on your hands all day and wait because you can't possibly suggest this is left-wing terrorism until it's safe to do so. Have you been told yet to not make any assumptions? Again, while there are left-wing groups running throughout the country committing political violence openly, wantonly, it's ridiculous to insinuate otherwise. Now, before we bring the radio crew back in, I do want to bring up one final point here at the end of this. We have noticed a definitive shift in accepting independent investigatory statements from the FBI, from the Department of Homeland Security, from the Department of Justice. Individuals who are not political hires, like they're not appointed by the president, they are issuing findings in press statements. Major media outlets are not even reading those on air anymore. It's very problematic. We got to bring the radio crew back. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
Good evening, everybody.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast. This morning, as we're covering all of the information that's coming out, there is a term that has started to pop up. I'm attributing it to whom I first saw it through. That would be Jack Posobiec at Human Events and the Post Millennial, who essentially have called the string of political terror attacks in September, essentially referring to this as Bloody September. And as again, just as your local hick from Eastern Central Indiana, I'm often a little bit careful about assigning what would be considered maybe dramatic terms to make something perhaps more memorable or credible. But I do believe after I started listing all of the political terror events that have occurred in September, that yes, this is in fact Bloody September. So much so that even The Atlantic, writing the article before Charlie Kirk's assassination, has admitted, again, The Atlantic, very to the left publication, has written an entire article about the imminent rise of left-wing terrorism in the United States. And according to polling, it's not slowing down. Right now, Generation Z and late millennials, that would be anyone born from kind of 92 late millennials to 96, and then Generation Z and forward, 30% of those individuals believe on the left that political violence is acceptable, while on the right, only 9 to 10% of the youths, I'm being very gracious here, saying that 30 and under, the youths politically active in the country, believe that political violence is ever acceptable. 10% and 30% are considerable numbers. And by the way, these are not isolated incidents anymore. Here's Senator Ted Cruz in Texas making that exact point today.
This needs to stop. Violence is wrong. Politically motivated violence is wrong. It was 2 weeks ago today that we saw a political assassination in Utah that tore the heart out of much of this country. This is the third shooting in Texas directed at ICE or CBP. This must stop.
And the only way that is going to stop is to hold a standard in which both parties are required to participate. I don't mean both political parties, although in this case it's very apropos. Both sides have to participate and be invested in the temperature lowering. Right now, we have in this country only one side of the aisle at large that's willing to do so. In fact, individuals in Congress on the left side of the aisle won't even acknowledge the assault on the ICE facility today. Representative Jerry Nadler, who is retiring finally, somehow upped his chin over his pants long enough to tell reporters, well, I don't know, what shooting in Texas today?
Do you condemn the attacks on ICE agents?
What attacks on ICE agents?
Oh, what attacks on ICE agents? Well, that can mean one of two things. Either number one, he doesn't know of any attacks on ICE agents, which there have been. We're about to go through them here because, again, if I'm going to make the claim that it is Bloody September, I better have the notes, and I sure do. Number two, the other alternative there is that he might suggest some attacks on ICE are okay, some attacks are not. That's certainly what we have seen from several representatives around the country, including the youths in the squad. The other tactic you'll see from Democrat officials when discussing any kind of political violence is like, for example, Democrat Representative Chris Pappas from New Hampshire, who just won't answer any questions at all. Because again, there is a quiet endorsement on the Democrat side of the aisle at this violent outrage.
Congressman Pappas, do you condemn political violence? Congressman Pappas, is it time to turn down the temperature? Okay. Congressman Pappas.
Again, you hear the staffer go, okay, that's enough. No questioning the tax-paid elected representative. That's enough.
Political violence is only increasing.
Get away from the car. They're gonna...
Yes, thank you, Gen Z girl. Get away from the car. They're going to drive it. Oh, yes. I thought they were just engaging in, parking out by the cliff for a little makeout sesh. Appreciate it. Now, this brings us to the series of incidents that do, in fact, characterize this as Bloody September. So I'm going to make the argument that this modern frame of violence begins all the way back with Luigi Mangione, which set the stage that political violence can and should be celebrated because if you just don't like someone enough, you can kill them in broad daylight, even if you're not even a part of their insurance company. Now, him being let off of terrorism charges in New York, to which there was rampant cheering and hullabaloo. I would argue, though, that Bloody September starts on August 27th with the Annunciation Church and School Shooting in Minneapolis, in which the transgender individual who hated, who despised anything to do with Christianity, who hated themselves for being transgender, shot up a room full of children and adults at prayer. By the way, I'm going to just remind you, the Democrats talked about George Floyd's death, the death of one guy from Minneapolis, the fentanyl-addicted pregnant woman beater who was killed, according to, again, Minneapolis training procedure. The officer, Derek Chauvin, doing everything he was supposed to do. That was talked about for months. January 6th, in which no one died at the hands of any of the protesters or rioters there that day. Talked about to this day. 2-3 weeks later, no one's talking about the Minneapolis shooting at all. At all. Parkland was talked about for months. And I would argue, as it should be. Nothing else about this. Now, my colleague Tyler O'Neill has listed 8 specific incidents of violence over at the Daily Signal. This was written on September 23rd, that being yesterday. 8 incidents specifically of political violence and threats in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination on September the 10th. That's another act of political violence directly. Now, there are a couple of other things before that we should point out. There have been several Antifa-centric, and when I say Antifa-centric, I mean that the Antifa social media pages have claimed open responsibility and have uploaded original video from the inside of the riots that have assaulted and maimed individuals who are not just law enforcement officers, but law enforcement officers included in 7 major U.S. cities. Those are all politically targeted terror events. Why do I say they are terror events? Terror events are unprovoked attacks that are meant to intimidate and to coerce for political change. Any attack on an ICE facility by a political group or an individual who has cause or reason to hate that particular organization is doing so, of course, to intimidate, to cause harm, to motivate political change. That is every assault on an ICE facility, especially by groups like now the aptly designated terror organization Antifa. Tyler O'Neill makes this particularly clear, though. So since Charlie Kirk's assassination, which I would certainly hope that I don't need to also explain why that is a horrendous act of political terrorism. On September 17th, police in El Paso, Texas, arrested 35-year-old Marinka Marquez and charged her with arson against a place of worship, specifically Beth El Bible Church. Now, why did she happen to attempt arson? Well, it just so happens that on September 18th, the day after the attack, they had held a vigil honoring Charlie Kirk, but previously, the church was known specifically to be a place that Christians and conservatives worshiped. I know Christians worshiping at a church, obvious, but conservative Christians in this case. Over the weekend, police arrested Annunciation Hernandez Santana, 64, after he opened fire at the office of the Sacramento affiliate for ABC, KXTV, after they announced that they were not going to be airing Jimmy Kimmel. A multiplicity of threats on other Sinclair affiliate facilities for pulling Jimmy Kimmel, bomb threats. That is, in fact, political terrorism. Kimmel himself was threatened as well, and Walt Disney Company itself was threatened as well. We don't have all the details on that yet, because Disney hasn't released a lot of those things yet to the public. Countless acts of vandalization in which public murals, facilities, statues were vandalized directly, defaced, property destroyed. Assaults at particularly Memorial Courtney Beth Anderson, age 56, for allegedly assaulting 73-year-old Valerie Jamison at a vigil for Charlie Kirk on September the 14th in the Villages, Florida. Setting fire to a memorial. David Gilroy, 64, for allegedly setting fire to a private memorial for Charlie Kirk on September 13th in Loveland, Colorado. Lest we also forget the setting on fire of people for the pro-Palestine left-wing cause in Aurora, Colorado. Though that may not be in September. It's still close enough in this bloody September range. Countless acts of political terrorism. And then now, of course, Portland, Oregon, Antifa just assaulted a man outside of an ICE facility. I think we actually have some of the B-roll on this one to throw up on screen. Antifa organizations encouraging further violence to stop immigration customs enforcement, posting additional posters like "Hey Fascist Catch," that's referencing one of the cartridges in the assassin's weapon on Charlie Kirk. Consistently, time and time again. We got to let the radio crew head to commercial. We'll catch you guys in a second. We're going to continue on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. Producer Nick.
Something to note about that flyer, it is referencing the John Brown Club, which Andy No has reported on being connected and affiliated to these groups that end up committing these acts of violence. An excellent point. And by the way, I just to acknowledge the limit in the scope of some of the stuff we were preparing. We had a couple of computer issues but before the show. Also was planning to go through Andy No's very accurate and concise and exhaustive reporting on other political terror incidents around the country. By the way, some of the arrests are
arresting individuals who had prior trained other people to commit violent acts on behalf of Antifa. But then when you have, Chuck Schumer after the Dallas shooting this morning, they bring him on MSNBC because he's been yelling about the budget. No one cares because he's tried to shut down the government 36 times in the last couple of years over complaining that the party in power isn't working with the budget. And, we want to fund LGBTQ stuff. No one cares. So they brought on Chuck to ask on MSNBC about the Dallas shooting. And here was his response.
Violence is just terrible. Everybody, right, left, center, I don't care what your politics are, has to speak out strongly against it. But look, I think, and I don't know what's happened here, and I don't know about the guns, but we need better laws on guns. I mean, we got something done a few years ago, but it's just rampant, and we have to do more.
Yeah. For yet another time, reminding people that most of these violent crimes are committed with illegal firearms. And by the way, it is already illegal to murder. It's illegal to openly brandish a gun inside a federal facility. Those gun-free zones, they're clearly working. Insulting. Then you have old drudgery goofballs like Hillary Clinton, brought from her castle in Transylvania to tell us all that, well, really, we need to lower the political temperature. Then watch what she does right afterward.
We have got to stop demonizing each other.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, I think most of that right now in our country's history is coming, from the right.
There it is. Of course. So we need to stop demonizing each other. And if these damned right-wing deplorable fascists would stop, maybe we could do that. Well, I'm just a simple broadcaster here from the state of Indiana, and I can't help but notice you're doing the exact thing that you're calling for the stopping of.
Coming from people who want to dominate, they want their point of view. Writing out slavery from history, that doesn't make it go away. We have got to stop with the finger pointing and the scapegoating.
But it's all the right. Hilarious. By the way, the writing out of the slavery, the Trump administration required the Smithsonian to take out the weird white culture things that they had listed to avoid, like being punctual or worship of the written word or either or statements. That's like white culture. The Smithsonian had incorporated since the early aughts. That's what Hillary Clinton's very upset about. Okie dokie. And by the way, this doesn't even bring us to the number of times over the last couple of months that the rhetoric has been exactly where you've expected it. We're going to get into that. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Just one final montage here for the record, because the Media Research Center, the crew over at Newsbusters, did such an excellent job of compiling these receipts. I thought that it was definitely worth showing y'all again. In the conversation about rhetoric and toning it down, again, here is the same crew doing the same stuff that you've always expected.
ICE is looking more and more like an American Gestapo.
They're huddled around the elevator banks in masks without identifying information. What a terrifying, these are Gestapo tactics.
But it has created this year, as they've seen the kind of fascist ICE Gestapo militias go round up Latino American citizens in places like LA.
ICE agents, masked ICE Gestapo agents getting more funding than any other law enforcement agency in the history of the United States.
ICE running Gestapo-like around our country.
The Gestapo had the same function. It was there to draw a distinction between us and them. It was not federally, it was controlled by the leader. And we're seeing disturbing similarities between this force and the Gestapo.
We've got these masked thug cowards kidnapping innocent people and sending them off to be slaves or tortured in other countries.
Dressing like thugs and acting like thugs.
People still want to come here despite the crazy. They still want to come here because they know in this land their voice is protected, their rights are protected, and there won't be jackbooted thugs coming in wearing masks over their face to take them off the streets. Oh wait, I'm sorry, Simone, that's happening.
Producer Nick.
I agree. We should get rid of these masked, thug-booted thugs storming the streets and making it unsafe to stand around.
Let's start with
the ones that carry guillotines around and threaten to murder people because of their occupation.
This,
type of people
they may call
are.
themselves one thing, but they're actually another. What about, start with Antifa?
Oh.
Wow.
That isn't who they were referencing.
All right. We should move forward because there is a way out of this. There is. There is something that this country can do and should do in order to pull itself out of this bloody September and out of this constant left-wing political violence. Because right now, if it continues in its current path, there will be retaliatory violence and it will get worse. It will. Because nothing has been done to solve it yet. And by the way to solve it is not just from the top of the presidential administration. That's not all. That's it. You cannot trust other individuals in this country to solve the problem on your behalf. It doesn't work like that. That is what got us into this mess in the first place. Those on the status quo, well, we just need to stop and just trust this administration to take care of it, or this representative to take care of it. They haven't. That's why Congress gave up all of its legislative ability and authority to bureaucratic agencies under the federal executive branch. So, what can you actually do? What can you realistically do? First of all, you have to make it clear, without any kind of a compromise, that disputing any kind of nonsense fake studies like from The Economist suggesting that, well, really, all political violence is from the right wing. We're just not going to count any left-wing acts of violence that we're going to include in the study. You have to discount that garbage, the both sidesers, and simply come to the open, honest, spoken conclusion. Left-wing violence is out of control and it needs to change. And, by the way, that until that point is reached, there cannot be a functional unity in this country. Pretending our way out of this is not going to get us out of it. If you have a serious infection, pretending that you don't have a serious infection is not how you fix it. You can't manifest curing an infection. And in this same way, you cannot just magically go, well, I'm just going to hope that they're going to see someday that it isn't working and then it'll all be better. Guys, a lot of the previous shootings have been failures according to the stated goals of both the organizations that have sponsored them and claimed responsibility for them, like Antifa, and the individuals' own goals that are in their manifesto. They failed, but they still keep doing them. Because the real inherent goal is political terrorism, and that political terrorism is working. It is intimidating. I will remind you that ABC made the decision to bring Jimmy Kimmel back on the air after systemic acts of violence, specific acts of violence, not systemic, excuse me, against ABC, Disney, threats made to them. The intimidation tactics worked. Now, the second thing that you need to do is you actually have to be involved in your local community. And this involves two things. Number one, it involves if you see something, you must say something. You have to be vigilant. Otherwise, you end up like Irina Zarutska with a bunch of people around her not helping as she is stabbed to death. It is your responsibility to uphold your community. You may not like that. There are times when I don't like it. There are times when my local community in Greenfield, Indiana, royally upsets me. But that does not matter. You, as a citizen, a sovereign citizen of the United States, are required to invest your time not only in your family, which is the very core and the very foundation, to be an active member of your family, and then to be an active member of your community. I would recommend going to church, whether you are or not religious, whether you do or don't believe in God. Because from the church, a local church, as a Baptist, we're not really allowed to say this, but I don't even care what denomination. Go to a local church. Invest yourself in the community. You must. Otherwise, this country dissolves. It was not meant to exist as a national, federal, from the very top down, ignore everything around you style, essentially mob rule, because at that point, that's not really a republic. And then last but not least, you have to come to terms that reaching out to individuals who are on the left side of the aisle and maintaining, as Charlie Kirk did, actions of grace and kindness to individuals who are currently struggling, that is extremely important. And I'm not talking about those in the center tutting both sides. I'm talking about the youth who are currently struggling to move at all in this current climate and economy. There's a weird fuzz that has, or maybe a weird fog, perhaps. Sorry, I keep looking up because the clock time's almost over for us on FCC for the broadcast hour. There is a weird idea in the culture that holds disdain for the youth because, well, they're really lazy and stupid, even though that's been happening all throughout history. Every generation thinks the generation after them is lazy and stupid throughout all of history. But the investment in the youth, I've seen countless Republican clubs that don't even make any attempt to reach the youth whatsoever. They just expect that 20-something-year-old young men and women are going to come listen to a bunch of old people talk about how it was in the Reagan administration. That's not enough. And the attitude that a lot of older generations in this country have is, well, it's not my problem. I'm going to die here pretty soon anyway, so... No, you are a citizen from birth to death. And in the same way to the millennials, and what I encourage to those who are my own age, that getting involved is their responsibility and going under the wing of someone older than us. That the older generations also have the responsibility to reach down even when the youths are petulant, as we often are. Radio crew, we'll see you soon. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. We'll continue on the live stream. So, those things said, if you haven't, gotten out your various pitchforks and things like that. There is one question I do want to answer before we get into some of the excellent comments by Vance today, and then we will very briefly talk about Tylenol and Kimmel. What about those of us who live kind of in the rural and we're really away from everything and we're insulated? Correction, you are still insulated. You are less insulated than you used to be. I will remind everyone, this violence used to only be seen on rare occasions in the early wee hours of the morning in some inner cities in the United States. And then it became in every major city in the United States. And then it became all hours of the day. And then it started moving into the suburbs. And then the demographics, then it became small and mid-sized towns as well. Here in Indiana, where I am, how many of our smaller cities are not safe places to be anymore? It is closer to you than you think, even if you're out in the middle of nowhere. And it is one of the reasons why I encourage, and by the way, us throwing this together too, because I don't just mean to, I'm not trying to go after, it's all the boomers' fault and Generation X's fault. I don't mean that whatsoever. What I do mean is that your work is not done and there is still a responsibility, just as much us, the youths, those in the end of the millennials, the Gen X and the I Alpha behind them. Now, that said, Vice President J.D. Vance had the opportunity to talk about this, and I think that his comments regarding this entire situation are very apropos.
Because here's what happens. Because here's what happens when Democrats like Gavin Newsom did say that these people are part of an authoritarian government. When the left-wing media lies about what they're doing, when they lie about who they're arresting, when they lie about the actual job of law enforcement, what they're doing is encouraging crazy people to go and commit violence. You don't have to agree with my immigration policies. You don't have to agree with Donald Trump's immigration policies. But if your political rhetoric encourages violence against our law enforcement, you can go straight to hell and you have no place in the political conversation of the United States of America.
He's correct. Now you might say, Tony, wait a second here. Didn't you just say that we need to do a better job of kind of, reaching out and being invested in the community? How does, the vice president saying, if you're going to act like this, then go to hell. I'm not dealing with you right now. How does that fit in? The other side that requires your direct action is to understand where we are at this point in time. There are individuals who cannot be reasoned with. They can't. You're not going to magically one day just, convince Gavin Newsom or some of the individuals in Antifa to suddenly one day they're going to wake up and realize, civil exchange of discourse and ideas, that kind of a thing. No. The idea that we live in a free marketplace of ideas right now and that, everything is very free speech and free economy and everything is very, still all of these things are safe and secure. They're not. My friend Charlie Kirk was shot participating in the First Amendment on a public space. And he was shot in the open in the middle of such discourse. When Vice President J.D. Vance gets in front of the country and says, yeah, people are going to be arrested. Yes, people are going to be held to account. Yes, we are going to investigate organizations that we believe are tied to Antifa. Yes, we are going to label Antifa a domestic terrorist organization. It has come to that. It has. Now, look, you can put your hands over your eyes. You can try to whistle past the graveyard as hard as you want. Right now, you see a lot of older Democrats doing that. When I showed you the representative from New Hampshire who was trying to avoid the journalists and get in his car, that's what he's trying. Oh, maybe it'll just go away if I ignore it long enough. It never does. An infection which is ignored never goes away. It must be dealt with. Otherwise, by all means, when you and I someday are being knelt down on the stoop in our last moments, and you go, well, at least we didn't use the arm of the government to, infringe on any particular rights. Yeah, yippee. Cheers. A recognition of where we are is deeply important. And by the way, that doesn't mean some kind of hyper governmental takeover, but the recognition at the very base that there are people who no longer hold your common values in common with you, that don't love this country, that don't believe that if you were, again, bleeding out on the subway, they wouldn't do a thing for you without being ordered to. I'm sorry. I don't feel as though it is incumbent on me as a broadcaster to tell you that you need to take them seriously. You say, well, what about like Christian love? What about, Christ said love everyone. Absolutely. But there are people that Christ did not spend his time on. Do not cast your pearls before swine. Christ did not spend his time every single day going in and trying to convince the Pharisees of the truth. He didn't. He called them a pit of vipers and then went to the lost. If you're going to spend your time pretending that, well, the reasonable, rational lady who's yelling at the dad at the Phillies game, who is screaming and smacking her hand on the car door in Ohio, or who is ranting about how you're an evil, fascist, bigoted Nazi on Facebook, yeah, I just don't think you should waste your time on her. I don't think it's useful. That said, my biggest case for this, we're not going to talk about Jimmy Kimmel tonight because we'll have to cover that one tomorrow. Tylenol. The ways that the left has decided to get back at the right. Okay, so as a reminder, the Trump administration, Donald Trump gets up and says, yeah, there are some links from some studies we've observed that show acetaminophen, Tylenol, probably shouldn't be taken gestationally because it's linked to neurological development issues in children if it's taken during gestation. And I've listened to the entire press conference again, which is difficult because, again, as I've told you guys before, I'm not a huge Trump speaking for a long time fan, or RFK Jr. speaking for a long time fan. May love the stuff that they have to say. It's hard for me to focus. The ADHD kicks in and starts bouncing off the walls. I listened to the entire press conference again. RFK Jr. was probably the most moderate that I've ever heard him. And still, all of the academics in the center came out and said, oh, he's doing such dangerous things. And all he said was, yeah, there's a lot of different studies that have suggested recently that there are some potential links. And then RFK Jr. also said, there are also some studies that don't show any link. We are only going to ask that because the answer is indeterminate, physicians let their patients know who are pregnant, OBGYNs, they let their patients know, hey, Tylenol could have these adverse effects. We might try to seek a label addition in the FDA. Hey, this might lead to this. It might. We don't know yet. And everyone flipped out and thought that RFK had some kind of conspiracy theory that all autism came from Tylenol, which I was listening for him to say that. He never said it once. Just didn't. Now, of course, a lot of these studies are from Johns Hopkins and Harvard. And I did go through the, particular NLH library and actually looked through all of the, the different observational studies and intensive studies and qualitative studies and quantitative studies, looked through them, that kind of a thing. I'm just not seeing the big problem. And still, you had people coming out on videos on TikTok either drinking a bottle of Tylenol or popping a bunch of Tylenol with like the RFK Jr. picture up as they were getting him somehow. Okay, that'll show him. The silliness is constant. And honestly, with that, I know probably a slightly different episode than we normally do. Definitely stick around because I believe on the Daily Signal, they're getting ready to premiere perhaps, I think, Bradley's video with Harmeet Dillon. They might be airing it early. Elise texted me and asked if we were going bonus tonus this evening. And I said, just for a bit. So for those who tune in, we really appreciate you. That's right. 2 things. Chris Streeter asked, can President Trump please give a big, beautiful hello to Noah McLean in Bethlehem? Love the show. Watch every evening. You're going places. That's very kind. Thank you for the super chat. Again, we don't ask you to tip. That is very kind of you to do so. We really appreciate it. Tanya Folk said these journalists are a joke. She's correct. And Jeff USMC pointed out, used to be excited about the upcoming struggle with the left and their skinny, easy to blow over Antifa members and all of their uninsured Altima drivers. That's very funny. He said, but now with this September, I'm getting concerned a bit. There is an author at Town Hall I would highly recommend you read, Kurt Schlichter. He's been on the show before. Kurt Schlichter is the kind of guy who says, buy guns and ammunition, but do not seek civil war. Do not seek a battle. Keep your head on a swivel. Don't advocate for things to fall apart. But at the same time, recognize that these events are not isolated anymore, and your vigilance is required as a citizen. And I think he's correct. With those things said, hope you have a wonderful evening. We'll be back tomorrow. This is the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Take care.